Okay, well, I know we've got a lot of questions tonight, so let's just go ahead and kick this thing off and let's get this party started. Thank you all for joining us for this education hour. My name is Luke Fedlam. I'm the co-executive director for the College Basketball Parents Association, the CBPA. And as you know, the CBPA is about community, education, advocacy. And tonight, we just are excited to welcome you to our second educational hour. So tonight's session is with the NABC, the National Association of Basketball Coaches. One of the priorities that the CBPA identified quickly in our evolution was to develop relationships with major stakeholders throughout college basketball. So we're excited tonight. We're thankful to have the executive director of the NABC, Craig Robinson, as well as the deputy executive director, Nate Pomeday, with us tonight to share more information about their organization, but really most importantly, answer your questions as parents. We also wanted to share that we're going to be looking to have a conversation like tonight's conversation with the Women's Basketball Coaches Association in the near future. We're thankful for the women's basketball parents who are on our steering committee and the members that are with us tonight. So look for that coming up here in the near future. And you have Craig's bio as part of the invitation, but I just want to share a few kind of housekeeping notes before we get into this. So for the first half of the webinar, we're going to have opening remarks from Craig and from Nate. From there, we're going to have some of our steering committee members asking questions, and then we'll open it up to Q&A as well. So if you have questions that you want to have addressed this evening, at the bottom of your screen, you see a button that says Q&A. Go ahead and hit that button and you can put your questions in there. It's a lot easier if you put them in the Q&A as opposed to the chat, because that's where we're going to be pulling them from. Also, tonight's webinar is going to be recorded and it'll be included in our newsletter that's going to be coming out tomorrow. So definitely feel free to share that with other parents of basketball players that you know. So I have said more than enough. I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to Courtney Scott, the co-executive director of the CBPA as well.
Thanks again, Luke, and thank you to the NABC, Mr. Craig Robinson and Mr. Nate Pomeday and all the families that are in attendance. We appreciate you attending. This evening, we have the following members of the steering committee with us to help moderate today's session with the NABC. Our president, Mr. Kareem Moody, parent of Arkansas guard Moses Moody. The co-vice presidents, Stacy and Roger Johnson, parents of Western Illinois forward Rod Johnson Jr., USC commit Kobe Johnson, and NBA 2021 lottery pick Jalen Johnson. Our co-secretary, Molly Manley, she's the mother of Jalen Suggs. Our co-executive director of education, Miss Allison Tegler. Her daughter, Mia Curtis, attends Dartmouth. And our regional ambassador, Miss Barbarita Springer, mother of Jaden Springer, who plays at Tennessee. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Craig Robinson, executive director of the NABC, to get us started by sharing an overview of the NABC for parents, where the organization has been, is today, and headed for the future, helping coaches to better the game of college basketball. Mr.
Thanks,
Robinson,
Courtney.
I'll turn it over to you. Yes, sir.
All right. You can hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Good. Thanks, Courtney and Luke, for inviting Nate and I to be here with you all. It's always exciting to share time with you. And I want to thank all the parents on the steering committee and all the parents who are in the audience listening. We're really excited to develop this partnership, and hopefully I won't spend too much time talking, and I'll allow you guys to ask questions. But this is the first of many times that I'm sure we'll get together, and we really look forward to your feedback and questions, and anything we can do to help. Don't hesitate to call on us. So just a brief overview of the National Association of Basketball Coaches. We represent the majority of college coaches across the country, irrespective of division. So Division 1, 2, 3, NAIA, junior college. We have high school coaches who are members, and we are about 5,000 strong at this point. And our core pillars to focus on are advocacy, education, leadership, service, and we're adding inclusion as a fifth pillar just this year. We really thought that inclusion should be part of our strategic plan and focus, so we've added that. And just a couple of things here, and so we can get to the questions. You know, when I was asked to take this position, there were some things that I wanted to accomplish in this seat. And first and foremost, you know, when I was growing up, coaches were right under your parents, right? So I had my parents as role models, but right under that, I had my favorite coaches. And I think part of my job here is to restore some of the luster that has been lost in the coaching environment, and help make us all accountable to you as parents, and especially to your players. So that's something that's really big, near and dear to my heart, and high on my priority list. Nate and I want to make sure that we're modernizing NABC operations. That's just a natural sort of leadership thing we want to do. But what we really are really proud of, what's moving quickly, that we thought we could see needed when we were on the outside looking in, is that the NABC should be working closely with the NCAA, right? We should be sort of in lockstep when new legislation comes out, when help with enforcement, help with accountability of coaches. We should be working together, not apart. And then one of the another opportunity that I think we have here, that Nate and I would like to sort of make sure you guys know as partners, is that we're going to be very transparent about how we think, what we do, and how we operate. So, you know, those are just some of the things we're going to work on. And then the last, but certainly not least, as I started out in the beginning, more up-to-date feedback from coaches and from players, and now adding the CBPA, players' families, that will help us do our jobs better. So I really look forward to this relationship. I look forward to the give and take of ideas, and I look forward to doing what I can to help all of you and your children get to where they want to be. So with that, I think, Courtney, we could open up for Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Robinson. Let's get right into it. Mr. Moody, I'll turn it over to you and let you begin with our first question.
Yep. First of all, I just want to thank all the parents that are tuned in. I know for the current parents and the future parents, first and foremost, you know, us as parents, our first priority is for the well-being of our children as they're playing basketball. And so it's always refreshing when we have access to coaches and just new information that's going to help us do a better job with our kids. So again, I want to say thank you for that. And while, you know, just being a part of the CPA is mostly about education, it's always good when we have a chance to just talk to stakeholders and influencers who can really help us understand basketball. Because one of the things that we like to say is that, you know, when parents are involved, you have better basketball. And so that's really what this is for us. But I will kick off the questions. Again, I want to thank you guys for being here. Let's just talk about coaches' relationships for a minute. And, you know, one of the things that we're curious about is, as parents are trying to be or supportive of an organization, being supportive of your program, you come in with a lot of excitement with your kid, but of course we're walking into a new environment. Can you talk about ways that parents can be more engaged around helping you help our kids, or just being an asset to you as a coach?
Well, you know, I think it all starts sort of pre the enrollment process, right, Kareem? I think that with all of you parents out there, understanding that in the recruiting of your child, you are the client in the situation, right? So you should feel like you have all the right and the privilege and the comfort in the world to ask whatever you need to ask of the coaching staff, of the network within the coaching staff, and with other players, to find out what you need to find out about the situation. And I recommend doing that by preparing a list of questions that are twofold. One, you want to have a list of questions that you can ask every single school that you're talking to, so that way you can build up a data set where you can compare and contrast the different schools. And then you prepare a set of questions that are specific for that university. So you tailor some more personalized questions for individual coaches and schools. This is the time to gather the data, and you have to do it systematically and confidently.
Hey, if I can kind of add a follow-up to that, because of course that's, I'm gonna say, easier said than done. If I'm a parent, this is my first time coming in, talking to a coach. If you're a big institution with a lot of institutional history, and this is my first time at it, you know, does the coach play a role in helping me do that? Or how do I get to where I'm asking the tough questions without upsetting you or put my—
Yeah, Kareem, I think that you have to, you know, that question can be answered differently depending on what organization, what institution you go to. All these coaches are going to be different. And let me start out right now by saying this. I told some of you who I've talked to before, you know, it's the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of our coaches are really good at what they do. 20% of them are not. And I will say the same thing about you know, people who are getting recruited too. So you want to find out, you want to be in that 80%, and you want to be dealing with the folks in the 80%. But the question of, are coaches supposed to help you with that? It'll depend on where you go. Some are more likely to help you with it, but I have to tell you, I mean, I represent the coaches. It is really the parents' responsibility to get comfortable. And if it's the first time, if you think you're going to be nervous the first time, practice on somebody where you don't want to go, right? Practice on a school that you know you're really not interested in. They might be 8th or 9th or 10th on your list. Practice and get comfortable so that when you're ready to talk to the people you're interested in, you feel comfortable enough to ask any question you want.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, get some practice in. I'm gonna ask this follow-up question here. Do coaches and parents, I mean, do coaches talk amongst each other? Because I was curious. I know my role when I was going through recruiting, I was not necessarily trying to make friends. I wanted to just get to truths and answers. And so sometimes that might have meant rubbing the coach the wrong way, trying to stay in the 80% while, you know, answering the questions that I need asked. But I would just be curious to know, do you guys have like a network of information you share amongst parents, like parents should be doing with coaches?
Absolutely. And I'm gonna let Nate touch a little bit on this, but coaches, we all talk to each other. When I was a coach, I talked to guys who I was friends with. I talked to guys who I was not friends with, who I was in competition with. We're both recruiting the same kid. I used every aspect of my network to find out what I could about kids, about their character, about their parents' character, about their high school coaches, about their high school coaches' thoughts about the players and about the parents. Oh yeah, and if I found out bad information when my friends asked me about that, I passed that along to look out for them. But I'm gonna throw this one to Nate. Nate, you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. I think you have some coaches that are going to be really strong with parents, and they're always going to be engaging with parents. And those coaches tend to know the types of kids and parents that they can feel comfortable with and bring into their program. If you find yourself, and then there's the other side of the coin too. So if you find yourself as a parent really not able to connect or have those conversations early on with a school that's offered your son a scholarship, because I think there's always the testing out part of the feeling out part of the coach evaluating the student athlete and the family evaluating the coach and the program. And then when there's a mutual, then usually scholarship offers come out. And that's when I think you'll learn a little bit more about where that coach relationship goes. I have two examples a really good friend of mine isn't a basketball coach, he's a football coach. But once he's identified, and he's a Big Ten football coach, once he's identified a student athlete he likes, he turns to evaluate the parents to decide if this is a kid he really wants to recruit. So that sort of goes to your comment about, do coaches talk about parents who are in their interactions with them? And we all know there's some that get kicked out of games, and there's some that are fantastic. It goes both ways. So that, and then on our experience, and I go to my experience coaching with Craig was always really good with parents. So I knew if we had a player that was going to require a lot of parent interaction, whether there was work that student athlete needed off the floor, just in development and things that would come up where this was going to be a situation where mom or dad were going to be heavily involved. And once Craig was comfortable in that scenario, we knew that this could work out. That so-and-so's mom, she wasn't calling me as the assistant, she was calling Craig. And never would she call me to say, I can't get a hold of Craig. So you just, but that's because she found the right fit in us. And he was the type of kid that we A, felt we needed to recruit, and B, understood what it took to bring him into our family. And we're going to make that commitment. But that was all part of the evaluation process, Kareem, like all part of that. And the hard questions were asked, and lots of research was done behind the scenes too.
So in short, it's okay to ask the tough questions. You're okay with it?
Well, and I'll say this, if you can't ask the tough questions, then that's your answer.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you get an answer without asking a question.
Yeah.
Or sometimes without them answering the question, you've got your answer.
Yeah. Good point. All right, I better pass it on. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Miss Springer, go ahead, Miss Springer.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome, Mr. Wood.
Thank you all so much for, allowing us to ask these questions and you all being so open and honest with us. We really appreciate it. So my question is kind of twofold. So what accountability can there be for coaches with how they treat their players verbally, whether it's on the sideline, on camera, off camera, or on social media? And then the second part of that is there a double standard with players being asked to keep team relations in the locker room, but coaches not doing the same thing?
Yeah, Barbarita, thanks for that question. That's an interesting question and a tough question, but a lot of this is you're going to hear kind of the same answers. I think there are coaches out there who handle things properly or I shouldn't even say properly. They handle things differently. And you want to first and foremost understand who you are and understand and have your child understand what kind of player he is. And then you determine who you are and then start to make your college recruiting choices based on that, and you can alleviate a lot of this heartache. Because the one thing about our coaches is they've got a track record, and you can witness that track record by going on various content places like Synergy or Huddle and watching games and listening to games and seeing how guys coach. You talk to other parents. You talk to players, have your players. I mean, in this day and age where you've got AAU and kids going to the same high schools who are really good, they know each other. They know a lot of people, a lot more people than Nate and I did when we were players from other teams. Use all of those resources to find out who you're dealing with. Is that the kind of coach that you want your child to play for? Does he embarrass his kids, or is he does he do it fairly or off camera? And that's the first. If you do the work beforehand, you'll have a lot less errors once you get there. But to get to your point about a double standard, you know, what you have to understand is there is a double standard between player and coach, right? One's the coach and one's the player, but there shouldn't be a double standard in how you behave. Like your behavior should be held, you should be held accountable for your behavior. But again, you don't want to find this out once you're already in it. You want to find this out well beforehand. And, you know, quite honestly now, the accountability part of this equation is moving into the parents and the players' laps now with this transfer portal. I mean, you know, being able to transfer freely when things aren't right, when you have made a bad decision, that's good. Your lives are going to be made easier with that, and that'll be a real test of accountability there, because people will vote with their feet.
Let me ask one more question, if you will.
Sure.
So we watched some things transpire recently, you know, in social media and in the media, where, you know, coaches really kind of, you know, dogged out a kid, in my opinion. So now that that family is already there, because of course that coach sold themselves like they were the best thing in the world, they're going to take care of your kid and so on and so forth. Now that they're there, what would be your suggestion on how that family should deal with that situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, I want to state here, I don't know the situation you're talking about. So this is just kind of a general way that I would counsel, I would counsel my friends if they were in that situation. I would go right back to the communication aspect of this relationship. I would have a meeting with a player. I mean, if I were the player, I'd have a meeting with a coach, and if I tell you this, if I were doing this with my own son, I would have my son have a meeting with the coach first before I did, and have him advocate for himself, because there's a level of growth that could be could happen with your own child in this situation, because this is just the beginning of a bunch of life experiences. So I'd have him have a heart-to-heart conversation. Now, I could help him prepare for it, but I would have him have it and find out a few things. One, what are the expectations of me? What can my expectations be of you? What's the expectations of the situation? Where do I stand vis-a-vis everybody else? Those are a few things that I'd have that conversation with. And then if the player hasn't resolved it or is not satisfied, that's when I would get involved as a parent. So, but again, you have to feel confident enough to be able to ask very hard questions. And that's why it's so important that what I was saying to Kareem earlier about being confident enough to do this beforehand, because beforehand you have the leverage. After the fact, you've lost a lot of leverage because you're already there. So you want to make sure on the front end of this that you make the best possible decision you could make. And Barbara, I don't know if that answered your question, but I hope I did.
You did. Great. Thank you so much.
Good.
Thank you very much, Ms. Springer. Ms. Manley, we're going to go ahead and slide to you, because I know Jaden plays in about 30, 35 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and
well, Courtney, you should have had her go first.
I wanted to hold her here as long as I possibly could. So
okay. All right, go ahead, Molly.
My question is, how often do conversations happen where coaching staffs talk about helping players through difficult times versus maybe not helping them through and maybe getting them to move on to their next venture?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a good question. I was wondering where you were going with that second part. So you're just saying help. How do we as coaches decide whether to stick with a player or give up on them?
Yes.
Okay, that's a fair question. And again, this is on a case-by-case basis. But you know, and I was remiss in mentioning, because I'm with Nate all the time. Nate not only is my deputy associate, my deputy executive director, but he was an assistant coach with me when we coached together in college. And there, when issues arise is when we discuss them. Like, you know, there's no need to discuss an issue if there's not an issue there. So there's usually something that begins the process that is some issue. And as soon as it arises, Nate remembers this. We had a mantra with our players. We had 3 rules. That's all. 3 rules. Be on time, be in shape, and if something happens, I have to be the first or the second, if they decided to tell you first, person to find out about it. So if they followed those rules, we knew we were in a position where we could help them, right? So to get to your question of whether coaches are going to have issues, players are going to have issues, and they should be dealt with as soon as they pop up. Now, if they don't, then you have to think about, you know, how you got in this position with a group of guys who would give up on your child after one issue. I do think most coaching staffs are willing to work through normal first-time issues. Then if you have more than a couple of issues, then you're endangering of being put into a different category. So I feel very comfortable in saying that most of our coaches, you know, really you can't afford to have too many issues. So you know, the coaches really want to make sure that they're giving our players some room to be good and make a few mistakes here and there. And Nate, you can add to that if I've left anything out.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add that over the past maybe 3 or 4 years, I feel the majority of our coaches have recognized mental health and learned more about it and how to help student athletes who may be struggling, and that could be some of their problems, to work through some of that. And I think there's a good level of support for scenarios, but repeat issues with players who are continually, once expectations have been set, once they're become repeat and you're not getting that traction that you have, it at times the flip side of it, Molly, is the coach's job may be in jeopardy now from a public perception. So there's that aspect to work through also. And so, you know, we setting expectations and also understanding the type of coaching that your student athlete might need and their tendencies. I as a parent, my 4th grader is way different than my kindergartner, and I know which one's going to need what type of a coach. And that's, so I'm only relating it to that. But I think you'll be able to, hopefully, if you do your research, find that coach that will be able to work through. And then there's and you know which coach is better for which of your student athletes, I hope.
All right.
I also like to say I'm very happy with our coaches.
Yeah, well, you guys, you got one of our board members as your coach, so we're very familiar.
Yes.
Ms.
And very
Taylor,
happy he's on our board.
Yep.
And happy there's not a football coach recruiting him to play quarterback.
That was part of our decision.
And so, Mr. Robinson, Ms. Tegler is up next. Her daughter is Mia Curtis, and she's our lone Ivy Leaguer. Her daughter plays at Dartmouth, and she's our lone Ivy Leaguer. So, Ms. Tegler, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you both for being here. My question has to do with new coaches. How can parents help the relationship with a new coach who was not responsible for recruiting their student athlete?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's going to be a question that's, you know, I think it all, we should do some research, Nate, on the data on how many student athletes have had to deal with a coaching change, because I haven't heard those numbers. I only hear them the other way. But Allison, I would tell you that, you know, to get back to a point that I talked about a little earlier when on Barbarita's question, you know, teaching your child to advocate for themselves is one of those things that I would say first and foremost, you want them to be able to go in and kind of be comfortable talking to a person who didn't recruit them, but they're in a situation where they like the school, they want to stay at the school, they know there's a coaching change. So that's the first thing I would counsel. The second thing is I would be, as a family, which includes your player, be proactive when the new coach is, prior to the new coach starting, because you're going to know before a lot of people that a coaching change is going to come, unless it's your freshman year and you're coming into somebody who didn't recruit you. But you still want to be proactive when a new coach is being considered. So, and that starts when the process starts, because you're going to at least have one player or a group of players who are going to be on the search committee. That happens almost everywhere, irrespective of divisions, Division 1, 2, and 3. They always want feedback from search committees. Always want feedback from the student athletes, because that's so important, because they're really the customer in this situation. So if you can encourage your child to volunteer to be on that committee, that's a perfect place to start, because they'll get to talk to every candidate who comes through the door, or who gets to the round where they bring in people in. And that's usually a round of 4 or 5 people they'll get to meet. And then once the person gets hired, or, you know, you kind of start narrowing it down, be proactive on doing your research as if you're getting recruited all over again. Find out what this coach's background, where she came from, how she played, how her past players at another institution thought about her. Do your research on their style of play, watch film on them, figure out where you would fit in, or your child would fit in their style of play. Be prepared. Have your daughter be prepared on how she fits into the new coach's system. And if nothing else, you will earn the respect of the coach for doing what most players would never do. So and you know, having, you know, the 3 jobs that I had in Division I basketball, I all came in and replaced someone else. And I was always surprised that more student athletes didn't try to advocate for themselves. It was almost like it was a fait accompli, that they thought, oh, we're going to get rid of all these folks and then bring in our own folks. But that's just not how Nate and I operated.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Taylor, for your question. And the last question goes to Team Johnson. One of the things that is very, very important to Mr. and Ms. Johnson is the topic and subject of mental health. So Mr. and Ms. Johnson, I'll turn it over to you all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Courtney. And thanks, Craig and Nate, for being here tonight and answering these, you know, what we all consider very important questions. Ours, as Courtney mentioned, is related to the mental health piece, right, of these college athletes. And we're just curious on where your association and its members stand on how they help their teams and players with their mental health and wellness. And kind of a follow-up to that is what kind of approach, you know, we're looking for more of can there be maybe a more proactive approach for these kids and teams versus reactive?
Yeah, Stacy, that's a really pertinent question at this time, and a good question. And I'm going to give you some examples, but I want to kind of go back to what Nate said a bit earlier. You know, because mental health has become to be accepted as a real national problem. Our coaches, but coaches everywhere, are taking this so much more seriously as being like an injury, right? So that if your mind is injured, there needs to be sort of triage, and then there needs to be rehab, just like as if you had sprained your knee. So and believe me, I played back in the day when coaches paddled you when you missed the layup. So imagine what my mental health would have been like, or our kids going back then. And I see Kareem laughing because he probably played for a guy just like me down there. But our coaches are extremely attuned to mental health needs of their players, and particularly after this COVID-19 season. And the example I wanted to give you is, I've been in this job almost 7-8 months now. I started in July. And so I started right smack dab in the middle of a pandemic, and the season was starting. And I will tell you that the primary issue that I walked into, that our coaches were fighting for, was to understanding that if we decided to have a season, which hadn't been decided, that if we were going to have a season, these kids were going to be under a huge mental strain. Forget about getting in shape for playing, having to quarantine, stay confined, socially distant. They knew that this was going to play on the mental health of their players, and they were fighting for more time on the court. And I don't know how many of you, those of you who have college players know, but some of you who don't have college players and have high school players, what you should know is during the season, you're allowed so many hours to be with your team, both for on the courts instruction and off the court meetings and stuff. And our coaches were fighting hard for more time with the team, either on the court or off the court, because they knew they needed to be around their guys more, not because they wanted them to practice more, but they knew the players were going to be suffering being isolated, and they wanted to have sort of a way to help be sort of a home away from home and be around them more. So I feel extremely comfortable with you guys' question about mental health and where it's going. And I just think that when I've talked to Luke and Bruce and Courtney and Trey about this, about developing a handbook of questions for you guys to ask when you go on when you have your recruiting phone calls and you visiting people, that this should be one of the top questions. How do you handle mental health issues? Who's the person responsible? Who will my kid talk to if they have any kind of depression or any kind of mental health issues? Can I meet that person? If they're not on staff, what hospital are they affiliated with? Is my insurance going to cover this? Is your insurance going to cover this? It's way too important to be too nervous to talk about that. And it's not, it's one of those topics now that is on the tip of everybody's tongue.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep, sure, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we've got about 20 minutes left. And so again, if you're in the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to throw your questions in the Q&A. We're going to start taking those questions here in a second. Before we do, I believe, Craig, you have some questions that you wanted to ask of the parents, some surveys that we were able to populate a poll that we'll launch here in a second. But do you want to provide some context to the questions that you're interested in?
I sure do. I told Luke and Bruce, I'm not coming back unless I get to ask some questions this time. And so but the real truth about it is, it's just like I said to you in the opening. I think feedback and transparency are some of the most important things for both sides. And I just thought, with some of the issues that we're dealing with as sort of an organization and as coaches, and we're talking to the NCAA about different things, I thought it would just be really interesting and important to get some feedback from you folks. So I had 3 survey questions, and this Zoom survey thing is such a cool thing to do. I love doing these. So I wanted to ask you 3 questions, and the first question is, in a traditional year of recruiting, not a COVID year, both scholastic and travel basketball recruiting, would you feel as a parent better about opportunities for your student athlete to be seen by coaches in the fall versus in the June, versus in June? Right now, there are some scholastic events that take place in June. If those were moved to, say, August or September, would that help you guys? That's the first question. The second question is about official visits, because some of our coaches feel like there's too many official visits because not everybody ends up taking them all. So my question would be to you, would it be better for families to have a total of 6 visits, with 3 in your junior year and 3 in your senior year, compared to the current 10 visits, 5 and 5 in your junior and senior years, respectively? And remember, none of these, there are no right answers here. I'm just seeking information. And then the final question is, would you as a parent, gets back to the point I was just talking about with time allotted for on-court work. Do you feel that the current amount of time is good, which is during the off season, it's 4 hours, it's 2 hours a week. On the season, it's more like 4 hours a week. No, it's 10 hours a week. But are you in favor of more or less court time for your student athletes? And if you be kind enough to fill out the survey, it'll show you your answers, or it'll show you the percentages once you fill it out.
All right. So while people are filling it out, just to let you know too, when the newsletter goes out tomorrow, you'll see these questions in the newsletter that'll have an opportunity to answer them as well. So if you answer them tonight, you see them in the newsletter tomorrow, don't worry about answering them again. But we wanted to make sure that we capture the perspectives of those who weren't able to be on the call as well.
And we really appreciate you guys taking the time to answer these questions too, because I'm sure you get surveyed as much as I do these days, because it's so easy to do.
So while you're still answering, I'm gonna leave the poll up. So if you haven't answered it already, feel free to answer it for us. But I want to make sure that we maximize the time that we have together. And we've had some questions that are started to come in, and so I wanted to just start throwing out questions that we've had. And the first question that I'll throw out that came in is, what are your perspectives, or can there be any greater support by coaches to limit player-to-player interaction, like while in games? So whether it's taunting opponents or getting in each other's faces, obviously, it's a physical game, but at the same time, there's some of that extracurricular activity that sometimes happens. Is there anything to be able to help limit that, as part of COVID-19 kind of safety measures?
Luke, that is a brilliant question, and that's one of those questions that you would think would naturally have come up in the whole protocol process, but because you're talking about player to player, no one has actually talked about that I'm aware of. We're worried about coach to player. We were worried about coach to coach. We were worried about ref to player and coach to ref, but nobody's thinking about player to player. And that is a really good point. So the answer is, I am sure that when I take this feedback back to the folks who are sort of thinking about this stuff, there will be some thought, some rethinking of this. But I think the idea of doing it here at the end of the season might be tough, but we might be close enough to the NCAA tournament where we could get something sort of talked about before we get to the tournament. But I think that's a great question, and it's something that, you know, that's the first time I've heard that question. So what I will do is I will take that question back to the folks who are sort of doing the health and safety protocols and try to get some feedback for you folks.
Awesome. So it looks like the poll results are up. So hopefully people can see the results of the poll. I don't know if
That's terrific.
there you go.
Really appreciate that. And I'm going to ask Nate to take a screenshot of that for us, so we'll have that as feedback. Really, you guys.
I'm just figuring out how to do that.
Yeah.
So I want to hit some of the questions that have come in through the Q&A function. A quick one, hypothetical question: if you are a walk-on athlete who is NCAA cleared as a full player, can he or she be put in the transfer portal?
You know what? That is a good question too. I think anybody can be in the transfer portal. Yeah. You know, I think that's the purpose of the transfer portal. And the staff at the NCAA who deals with that, and we're still trying to figure it out ourselves. But that's one question I think I feel confident answering, that anyone can be in the transfer portal.
Another question about communication, and you talked a little bit about this earlier. The parent says, I'm curious about the necessity on your end as a coach of maintaining an open line of communication with parents. Interested to know, you know, kind of, I think that kind of follow-on question was along the lines of like, should I feel honored if they're reaching out to me or not? Like, what is that? What should I expect in terms of, you know, communication, or am I a nuisance sometimes when reaching out, you know, to the coach and trying to have that open line of communication?
Yeah. And you know, Nate talked about this a little earlier. And before I get to that point, let me just say, this is again one of these that is, this one you can easily get figured out before you enroll, because that is a direct question that you can ask a coach and you can get the answer and determine if that's a place that you'd feel comfortable. Because if you're the type of parent who wants to call the coach up and chat every now and then, you want to know that you're not being a nuisance. And you know, I always felt it was my role as a coach to manage the parents. That was not, you know, my assistants were there for recruiting and then making sure the players had everything they need. But when it came to interactions with a parent, I wanted one voice. I wanted my voice. So there was no sort of discrepancy in the information that went back and forth. Now, there's a difference between calling up about and checking in on your kid and seeing how he's doing, or calling me up and telling me what I should be doing. There's two different things. And you have to feel out the coach, because there are some coaches who might want to have a little back and forth like that. But if he doesn't, and you're that type, yes, you are going to be labeled as a nuisance. But if you are the type of parent who wanted to call up and say, hey, my son has had a successful sociology exam, and that was his worst class. Didn't know if you knew that, but I wanted to let you know, because whatever you're doing, you know, if it was something sort of off the court that we could help him be a better player, I want to know that. I want to know that kind of information. So again, I know I sound like a broken record with this sort of getting these things out beforehand, but that's why it's so important, because you will end up at the right place the more questions you ask.
Another parent question: they're interested to know if the NABC would be interested in having some kind of parent component with your national convention.
You know that we would. I can say that. How we do that is delicate, because especially if your kid still has eligibility, because that is a recipe for tampering. And I see Rod Johnson there smiling, because he knew exactly where I was going with that one. But it would be terrific to be able to let more coaches understand what you guys are as a body. And I think now that we've understood this virtual world, that might be the way to do it, is invite people on to a virtual platform. And because I think we were talking about this before you all got on, how the world is going in this different direction. I believe that now our conference, while it's going to predominantly be in person at the Final Four, our convention, and we will have a virtual aspect of it from here on out. And one of our goals, Nate and I's goals, is to just not do it at the Final Four too. So we had a fall summit. We want to have a summer summit. So that might be an opportunity for us to sort of get you guys in front of our members. So whoever asked that question, that's a terrific question. It's something that Luke, Bruce, Trey, and Courtney and I talked about the last time we were together. So I really appreciate that question.
Next question. Has an opinion been voiced about players being vaccinated, whether it be optional, mandatory? Has there been any discussion at the coaches level about that?
We just had for the first time a meeting today where we were talking about the NCAA tournament and the controlled environment that we're going to have there. And we talked about whether it made sense to have rules for people who have been vaccinated. And it's just the trouble with that one, Luke, is that rightly or wrongly, 18 to 22-year-olds are on the low risk part of the continuum, right? And they're going to be the last ones to get vaccinated. But the way the vaccination is being rolled out and the numbers they're talking about, it could be likely that 70% of them might be vaccinated by the time next season rolls around. Like if you're talking November, a lot of them could be vaccinated. And even if they aren't, if all of us get vaccinated, then they'll be in better shape. And I'm not a doctor, and our coaches get accused of playing doctor when they're talking to their local health officials. So I don't want to be accused of that, but that was just my opinion.
Yep. Going back to the transfer portal, how do coaches perceive the transfer portal? Negatively, positive? Negatively.
And I'll tell you why. And I'm trying to remain as open-minded about this because, we didn't have a lot of people who wanted to transfer from us. And when they did, it was right at the end of our career there. But most coaches feel like there is an opportunity for growth for players who go through some trials and tribulations as a young player, and some of their best players have grown out of not being happy their freshman year. So that's one point. Two, there is the word I mentioned earlier. This will open up for that 20% that I was telling you who aren't doing stuff the way they should be doing. That opens another door for them to do things they shouldn't be doing, like tampering. And then thirdly, it's just a matter of numbers, right? Because typically coaches play 8 to 9 guys and you have 13 scholarships. So there's going to be 3 or 4 people who aren't going to play much. And you have to spend your time re-recruiting guys on your bench who weren't playing much. Otherwise, they're going to leave. And if they leave, you got to recruit more people. So those are 3 main reasons. And then the fourth is what I worry about. This is what I worry about. I worry that the transfer portal, and I believe it's here to stay. So I'm just stating this. It's going to make it harder for your high school students to get recruited. Just telling you, because if I'm telling the truth, I will take me a player that I've seen some track record on in college before I take a high school guy, because most of the high school guys are not NBA players. They are not. The ones who are, you already know who they are, and they're going to where they're going. Everybody else is a college student that's playing basketball.
And has had strength training and has lived in a dorm and has understood the rigors of college life already. Whereas the freshmen coming in, that is all brand new, and that's all difficult to navigate.
So I just think this will be interesting, and maybe it like anything else, it'll find its equilibrium point, but there's going to be some wild shifts before we figure this out, and I think it's going to hurt the recruited high school player.
I agree with Craig wholeheartedly. I think there will be some leveling out. The other two things I just want to remind parents that the transfer portal, the first time you transfer, if this rule passes, which we think it does, it means you won't have to sit out the next season wherever you choose to go. If you transfer again, after that, you will have to sit out that next year. So it's not like a free transfer, go, new season. Now, if you get to a point where you've graduated, then you could transfer again and go to a school that has a grad degree that your son or daughter are seeking, and you can play right away. So there's a little bit of difference there. But as difficult as it is for freshmen to interact on campus and to get to know their teammates and to get to know their coaches and to be away from their parents, once you transfer, you are starting that relationship all over again, getting to know teammates, getting to know school. It's like reliving your freshman year, your first year in college again and again, even though you're more experienced at it. I think that could be taking away some things. So that's why I think there's going to be a spike, and then it's going to level out, because I think some kids are going to realize sticking it through and having success my sophomore and junior year is going to be it has a better track record than maybe going right away if something doesn't work out. Now, I'm not saying all transfers, they're leaving because they're unhappy. A lot of times transfers are beyond basketball. There's a reason. So that I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon on that piece, because I'm in favor of the rule. I think it should be done. I think it's ridiculous that a basketball player gets treated differently than a soccer player.
Yeah. So the parent who asked the question put a follow-up question back in the Q&A. So I'm going to give them the chance for that follow-up, which is, do you feel that it's, do you perceive it negatively because coaches, can be losing leverage?
No. I like Nate said, we're actually in for it, but most of our coaches, I think, are against it, and not because you lose leverage. It's because of all the work that you put into a person that goes out the door, and there's no sort of payback. So, and maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way. Maybe you are losing some sort of leverage some way, but I don't see this as a leverage play. I see this as an overall, this is more work in an already, and you guys should know, and I'm here to say for the coaches, this job ain't easy.
Right.
It is not an easy job. It is a hard job, and it's a zero-sum game. So most guys are losing their last game, not winning their last game.
Yeah. So it's 6:59. So I want to ask this one last question, and then after your response, turn it over to Mr. Moody to close us out. But I feel like I really wanted to hit this last question. A parent sent in, they said, if a student athlete has a challenging major and the coach knew ahead of time that they were in a challenging major, what would you say is the best way to deal with that student if they're struggling?
From a coaching standpoint, if I knew he was in a challenging major and it was important to him, I would do whatever I could to help him get through that. And Nate knows this. We used to do this for one of our players who was an engineering major. Now I can't remember if it was at Brown or if it was at Oregon State. But we would set practice so he could go to his lab, right? I mean, that can, especially if you have your own practice facility, you can practice around different times. We always try to give our student athletes an opportunity to be excellent in the classroom. But again, this is something that, what am I going to say? You should find out how your school, your coach, how they operate in a situation like this. Because the last thing you want is to have a really smart kid going somewhere and taking classes just because they're easy and it's easier to play and all of that kind of stuff. You cannot allow that to happen, because most guys do not make it to the NBA. And I know the NBA folks on here, they will tell you that. The NCAA folks will tell you that. You have to be thinking that I can do both. I can do both. I'm not saying give up on your career, basketball career, because I certainly did. I went to an Ivy League school and I just knew I was going to play in the NBA. So everybody thinks they want to play in the NBA. That's how it should be. But you should be trying to be excellent in the classroom.
Wow. So I think that's a good place to close it out. I do want to say this. I know just sitting there listening to you guys, this is our, I guess, second, third visit, but I'll say that the National Association of Basketball Coaches are in good hands. You know, I really do feel it's refreshing to hear you guys with the truth and the honesty that you give us this feedback on, you know, so I definitely want y'all to know that we appreciate you just kind of giving us your time. And with that being said, on behalf of all the CBPA parents, future parents, and the staff, we thank you guys once again.
Thanks, Kareem. It's really refreshing to see a group like this. I mean, you guys are going to make other parents better, and that's, you know, listen. Somebody asked me the other day if Nate and I would get back into coaching, and we keep saying, heck no. This is much more fun because we can talk to all of you except and not just 13 of you.
Yeah.
So thanks for that, Kareem, and Bruce and Luke. Thanks for doing what you do, and keep asking us back. We're happy to come whenever we can.
All right. Hey, and definitely for parents, there will be future sessions. So, you know, stay tuned. There, you know, we got lots of stuff to talk about. I think it's going to be really beneficial and helpful to parents. So thanks again, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.